2018, this pier that you see me walking on broke in half. It was destroyed. The middle of it was smashed open by a windstorm, and boats crashed into it. Boats that got, detached from their mooring, crashed into the pier and left a gaping hole in the middle of this pier. So it was actually very terrifying because someone was at the end of the pier and stuck on one half of the pier in the middle of a storm and had to be rescued. A storm that destroyed the pier. Now I want to talk to you about a Bible verse. In Romans 8:28 it says this, "And we know all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose." You ever notice how often people, even people who don't know Jesus, use this verse and say, oh, it's all going to work together for good? It's amazing how it gets thrown around. But the interesting thing I want to show you from the Bible is it works together for good for those who love God and who've been called according to his purpose. And so it doesn't always work out for good for people who don't know God. They're vulnerable. Disasters happen. Now, first thing I want to tell you also about this verse, amazing. Listen to this. It says, all things work together for good. That word, work together, is synergy in the Greek. Synergy. Isn't that a word you hear a lot? And what that actually means is powerful. Two things coming together that normally wouldn't have worked together, where there's synergy and something good comes out of two things working together. In nature, a bee will go to a flower and get the nectar out of the flower, and while it gets that nutrition, it pollinates the flower. That's synergy. I was reading about cyclones, storms that can actually benefit the ocean, and they call this synergy, where a cyclone or a tropical storm will hit the water along the shoreline and it'll break up what's called red tide, which is toxic algae that's super dangerous. So God works together for good in a storm for those who love God. Maybe you've been in a crisis where a storm actually devastated something. It smashed something. Maybe you're like the guy at the end of White Rock Pier who got stuck there in the storm. He had to get rescued. It's okay if something has just devastated your life and you need Jesus to rescue. That's the one thing I want to say. The second thing about this story about the pier in White Rock is people work together. There was a synergy. People actually worked together for the rebuild of that pier. And there was fundraising, and it took a long time. And guess what? The pier is stronger now. It's back, it's rebuilt. I was walking on that strong pier today and it was stronger. So maybe you just have been hammered by a storm. Maybe something has come. Guess what happens when that can happen is you suddenly can question God. And you could even turn away from God. That's why it's so important in this passage where it says, for those who love God. Don't stop loving God. Ask him to rescue you like that guy in the helicopter. Then ask him for that grace, that synergy to work together with you for the rebuild of the pier. You know what's so important and interesting in this passage? It says for those who love God, which means agape. In that moment of crisis, it's so important for us to say yes. We lay our lives down for you, Jesus. We love you. Second thing, it says for those who've been called, the called, according to his purpose. So important. If you're pier is smashed, if you're in that crisis, for God to synergy work in you for good, you need to know you're still called. You need to know you have a purpose. Don't let the devil tell you it's over, your life's destroyed because a storm has smashed. It's time for the rescue. It's time for the synergy of God to work together for good. And it's time for you to say, no matter what, I'm called. I still have a purpose. And this storm is not going to stop my purpose. You know how long it took them to rebuild the White Rock Pier? Exactly almost 9 months. And that's what it's like when a storm hits. You can know God will use it for good. He's actually going to birth something new through you. So I want to speak hope to you. If you just got devastated by a crash storm, torn apart, remember, he uses it for good. Keep loving him. Know you have a purpose. And last thing I want to say, that word good, he uses it for good, relates almost always to the good and the character of the heart. So I want to encourage you, let Jesus help you. Let him rebuild everything for good because you love him. Bye.
No, you have to go over that way.
I have to go this way?
Yeah. And forward a bit, so
And
you're not
forward.
shadowed.
And
Or pull this
forward.
back a bit.
I liked it further back.
No.
No?
No.
Like that?
Yeah.
Okay, let's have a look.
Talk.
Hi. Ma.